Hi, I'm Laura Warnod and welcome back to the Culture Cabinet. Today we are going to talk about loneliness and anxiety at work. Why loneliness and anxiety? Well, first of all, loneliness is the main theme of Mental Health Awareness Week, which is happening between the 9th and the 15th of May. And anxiety because we think that anxiety and loneliness are intrinsically related, and they are one of the main phenomenon that happened during the pandemic, and also because anxiety is something that I am experiencing myself and that I live with every day. And so I thought I would give you some examples of what happened to me during the pandemic as well, and how this has affected loneliness too. I will also talk about why organizations need to address the issue of loneliness and anxiety at work. I'll give them some clues in terms of what they need to do to help their employees with loneliness. Okay, let's get started. So loneliness is a subjective experience that happens when there is a mismatch between the quality and quantity of relationships that we have and those that we need. As you may know, during the pandemic, we were socially isolated. And social isolation is actually a major risk factor for loneliness. Indeed, during the pandemic, we've seen a huge fall of the quantity of relationships and how it deeply affected the quality of the relationships that we have and that we need. Lockdowns and social distancing measures have reduced face-to-face interactions, and this has shown us and reminded us how much we need social interactions, social relationships, social connections to prosper and thrive. The truth is that loneliness was already recognized as a public health concern before the pandemic. Chronic loneliness, which is felt repeatedly over a long period of time, has actually a direct impact on our physical and mental health conditions. So this is actually really costly both for individuals and for society. And the pandemic has also compounded inequalities in terms of feeling of loneliness. For example, we tend to believe that loneliness is a problem of the elderly. Well, actually, when you look at the numbers during the pandemic, there's been a peak of feeling of loneliness for those aged between 16 and 24. They actually experience loneliness 4 times more than people aged 65 plus. Also, some life experiences like poverty or unemployment has deepened the feeling of loneliness among those people. But more remarkably, the British Red Cross has done a research and found that 38% of people from ethnic minorities were more likely to feel lonely and felt like they had no one to tune to, compared to 28% for white people. There's a range of factors that underline this divergence, and this has been exacerbated by the pandemic. For example, people from ethnic minorities background are more likely to be on lower income. There was a higher rate of mortality among Black people and South Asian heritage. With all the grief and anxiety and loss that this entails, plus people bereaving and living alone, this has really compounded inequalities among those groups. People experience more discrimination during the pandemic, and the difference is from 42% for ethnic minorities background to 24% for white people. So how is loneliness correlated to anxiety? The challenges and negative emotions related to the pandemic, attached to a loss of social contact and missing friends and family, had a huge toll on all generations, but especially young ones between 18 and 29 years old. Indeed, younger people stated that they experienced a lot of stress, anxiety, fear, boredom, frustration, and a sense of loss due to cancelled plans or missing rites of passage. For example, I know my brother, he didn't take the baccalaureate at the end of his high school year because of the pandemic. I also know a lot of people who didn't even have a graduation, or others that joined work during the pandemic didn't have any induction. Dr. Murphy, in his book Together, The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World, says that loneliness is associated with higher risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, anxiety, and depression. Indeed, if you experience loneliness, you are going to experience a feeling of stress. And stress on a short period of time and in low intensity can also be good because it can boost productivity, performance, or kind of motivate you to go outside and do something. But if you have chronic loneliness, this creates chronic stress and therefore anxiety. So people who were already experiencing loneliness before the pandemic were more likely to develop a mental health condition like anxiety or depression, and people with mental health conditions were more likely to feel lonely. If I take my personal example, I was already someone living with heavy anxiety before the pandemic, and it took me years to learn to live with it. But with the pandemic, it just felt like a complete reset. All the work and efforts that I've done to stifle my anxiety demon was gone. And like everyone else at the time, working from home, being cut out from workplace social interactions, living far away from my family and friends, and spending a lot of time on social media, I did feel acute loneliness, which amplified my anxiety a lot. It was a real vicious circle. So that's why I personally think that loneliness and anxiety are correlated. Because if you are someone who fears uncertainty, who fears the past and the future, and the world is actually telling you now to be scared of people, hell yeah, I'm gonna be scared of them. So then I end up fearing social interaction, social connection, and I'm just not comfortable going out, meeting people, and establishing new connections and new relationships. And this can lead to a downward spiral of withdrawal from others and into ourselves, and making loneliness more severe and harder to shift. So why it's important to address that in the workplace, and what organization can actually do to help their employees with loneliness. So first of all, it's important to remind ourselves that the pandemic has accelerated the shift towards remote working for jobs and occupation where there is the option. Lockdown has actually drove a way of creativity and innovation, with organizations adapting their services to connecting people at distance and finding ways to keep their employees engaged. However, the reality is that the pandemic has reduced opportunities for social interactions, networking, shared activities, all of which are really important for developing social connections. And what happens at work can also deeply affect our personal lives and relationship outside work. Research has also shown that employees' work loneliness triggers emotional withdrawal from the organization, which leads to decreased individual and team performance, disengagement and loss of creativity, surface acting, which means that it's the fear of expressing your real feelings and therefore being yourself, and impaired reasoning and decision making. If we continue to pursue efficiency at the cost of human connections, this is going to lead us to burnout, disengagement, quitting our jobs, and it's not sustainable for the organizations. Dr. Murphy says that there are two key barriers to loneliness. The first one is a visible barrier, right? It's the physical separation between us. And the second one is an invisible barrier that is usually informed by the culture of the organization, which keep us apart, prevent us from sharing, and therefore make us feel more lonely. So what do organizations actually need to do? They need to continue to offer people a range of opportunities to engage and connect, including remotely and face-to-face. They need to create a psychologically safe culture where people feel comfortable sharing. They also need to create a culture of belonging where there's no surface acting. Can you imagine not feeling comfortable sharing your own feelings because you don't feel included and you don't feel like you belong in the organization enough? They need to continue proactive outreach to people who are more at risk of loneliness, using data and warning signs to identify those in need of support. Support staff and volunteers who are working in more complex situations, and not just with skills and resources, but with mental health support. Take proactive steps to re-engage with people who couldn't connect remotely. For example, if you feel like employees were not really comfortable putting the camera on, or that they were not comfortable sharing during meetings, that's probably because remote working had made them more disconnected, more disengaged, and therefore more lonely. So try to recognize that and recognize that they will likely need more and additional support to address the issues of long-term isolation. Make a conscious effort to ensure that people can be involved in developing their own solutions to loneliness. And finally, make sure that there are special psychological support available for those who need it. These are just a few examples of the things that you can do to support your employees with mental health, loneliness, anxiety, and depression. Loneliness is a major topic that we just started to research and that has been largely impacted by the pandemic. And it's really key that we keep talking about these topics, whether in our personal lives and in organizations, and whether this is an issue that touches you directly or it touches someone that you know from close to far. Make sure that you talk about those, because that's the only way we are going to raise awareness and actually take action towards improving mental health in society and in the workplace. I am really passionate about those topics and about improving mental health in the workplace. So please make sure that you like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so that you can be notified each time I get new content out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!